Hey YouTubers, my vintage iron here. I wanted to do a video on cylinder heads, specifically 350 Chevy heads, the earlier style head. Get a lot of questions about 350 heads, which 350 head should I buy? I'm building an old street rod motor, I'm building a truck motor, what have you. Which 350 head should I be building? I've broken it down into a few different castings, and really when you look for cylinder heads, you need to look at the casting number on the head, because not all small block Chevrolet heads are created the same. There's a lot of differences in them. Some were much better performing than others, some were better at holding up against cracking than others, and so forth. So I've kind of broken it down, and I want you to take a look at these. So first head we've got here is this one here. Now this is an earlier head, and these were made specifically in the mid to late 60s, and it's a very good flowing head. These are what they call the Camel hump heads. They have a 64cc chamber, and so it's a smaller chamber, and you were able to get higher compression. It was a higher compression cylinder head. The most common casting number is 3782-461. Now, here's the thing about casting numbers. When it comes to casting numbers, what we're really concerned about is these last three digits here. In fact, most people that are looking for Chevrolet heads, small block Chevrolet heads, or even big block heads, for that matter, when they rattle off casting numbers, all they really rattle off is the last three digits. They'll say, hey, I'm looking for some 461 heads. Do you have any? These are great flowing heads. They are, you know, it's old technology, and of course, I got to preface this by saying that any of the factory heads, pretty much any of the factory heads that you get, especially the earlier ones, they are not going to flow as well as a set of aftermarket heads. If you buy a set of Dart heads or Trick Flow or Pro Comp or what have you, the aftermarket heads for the most part are much better flowing. It's newer port design and technology, and they really are superior to pretty much any of these factory heads. But the drawback is that they are expensive. So if you're building a small block Chevrolet for your pickup truck or your street rod or whatever, and you really don't want to go out and lay $1,200, $1,500, $2,000 in some cases for a set of heads, then there are some pretty good alternatives. Just because those heads do flow much better than the factory heads doesn't mean that the factory heads are you know, junk. They're decent. They work okay. And so and of course some better than others. So the 461 Camel hump heads, and you probably heard that term camel hump. So let me explain to you what that means. I've kind of taken the liberty. I've got some heads out of my core bank here, and what I've done, this is where we get the name camel hump. I've taken a yellow highlighter, and what you'll see is this pad on the end of the head, and it's got two humps on it. That's where the name camel hump basically came from. There is a drawback to these heads, however. The drawback to this head is it doesn't have any accessory bolt holes in the end of the head. The pulley setup that they used on these earlier heads was much different, and quite frankly, it wasn't a very good setup. Used V-belts, and it was just I don't know, an archaic pulley and belt system design, and I really don't care for it. The newer design came in 69, 70. They went to a different pulley setup, and what they started to do is they started drilling accessory holes in the ends of the head, as you can see here. So that's the thing you need to consider with the 461 head. It is a very good flowing head. It has a 64cc chamber. This one here, this is a core that we're going to rebuild, but this one here actually has a 2-inch, what they call a 202 or a 2-inch 020 intake and a 1/600 exhaust. That wasn't unusual for these heads. These heads here also they don't have the press-in studs in them. If you look down here, you can see that I've I've just screwed in a guide plate and a couple studs. This head is set up for screw-in studs and guide plates, so I can run a heavier spring on here, and I don't really have to worry about I don't have to worry about those press-in studs pulling out. So once we do this head up, rebuild it, we're going to put a new set of screw-in studs and guide plates in there, and we'll be in business. So that is what they call the camel hump head. Now let's fast forward here to early to mid-70s. This is a cylinder head that came out, and it's a decent head. The difference is that, and this is a 3988993, last three digits 993 head, and these are good heads, but they have low compression because they have a large chamber here. They have a 76 cc combustion chamber, which is going to lower your compression ratio. These heads were pretty decent castings. They didn't really crack very easily, and they had pretty decent flowing ports. They weren't bad for what they are. I mean, they weren't good for a street rod engine, but again, they are lower compression, which is very typical of pretty much anything made after 1970. They all went to this big chamber with a few exceptions. So, but if you were looking for a set of heads, I would definitely say that the 993 head is a pair of heads that's decent and worth buying. They would definitely work on a pickup truck or a street rod engine. The next head that I have here is similar to the 993, but in fact the casting number is very similar, but it's a 991 head. It's a 991. Now the difference in the 991 head is, the 991 head is a truck head. So it has smaller ports. It's got smaller intake and exhaust runners, so you're going to be a little more limited on the amount of air you put into the engine. Probably not a really good choice if you're building, you know, a street rod, a Chevelle or something like that. Great choice if you're building a truck head. Let's say you want to build a 4x4 and you want to make it a rock crawler. This cylinder head here has small valves. It has a 1-inch 500 exhaust valve, and it has a 1-inch 720 intake, as opposed to the 993 that has a 1-inch 500 exhaust, same thing, but it has a 194 intake, 1-inch 940 thousandths, pretty close to 2 inches. So considerably smaller. If you look at the heads here, you can see how much bigger that valve is going to be than this one. So the 991, it's okay for the street, it'll work. Probably not the best choice for something that you want to, you know, run pretty hard and make a nasty street rod out of. But if you're going to build a truck, these actually build more torque because of the smaller valves and ports. They build a lot of low to mid-range torque. So a 991 is an excellent choice for a 4x4. Very good head. So let's come up to date here a little bit. And we're really not up to date, but up to date over the camel hump heads. This is a 3987041 head. Now the 3987041, 041 heads, and you probably heard that term, has a 64 cc chamber. What they've done is it's similar to the 76, but if you look at the quench area, this is all filled in here. So this is a higher compression head. With a flat top piston and the correct gaskets and so forth, you can get right around 10-to-1 compression with these heads on a 350, as opposed to 8.5 to 9 on the open chamber. So this is basically the camel hump head with, ta-da! Now we got a broken bolt here, but this is an accessory hole. We're going to drill that out. It has the accessory holes in the ends, just like the 993 and the 991 and so forth. This is a very good flowing head. It also has large runners. It has a bigger runner on the intake and exhaust, so it flows very well. Very good choice. If you're looking for a street rod head and you're on a budget, you're buying factory heads, 041, one of the better castings, if not the best casting you can buy. There's also another head out there that's similar to this, and the last 3 digits of that one is a 186. So if you find a 186 casting, that's the last 3 digits, it's going to look very much like this. They made that head for a couple of years, 3, 4 years maybe. 68, 69, 70, 71, so on. They actually used that head on the 302 Z28 motor as well. So very similar to this, very good head. So if you can find either an 041 or a 186, you're doing really well. You can these heads like big valves. They like the 2-inch valves. Some of them actually have screw-in studs and guide plates from the factory. So very good head. Something that we need to mention here, and that's this guy here. This is a head that was basically very popular in the mid to late 70s. And this is a 33882 or 882 casting. 882s, for the most part, they have big valves. One of the things you'll notice is that on the 882, we'll pull this 991 over here, because these early ones that I've talked about are all pretty much the same here. You'll notice that there's quite a difference here in this area. What they've done is with the 882 is they lightened the casting. They made a much lighter casting because they were trying to lighten up the engines. The drawback to that is that the 882s, although they do flow okay, they do have a 76 cc chamber, which makes them, the lower compression version. They kind of had a tendency to crack. They were thinner, and if you got the engine hot, they were much more susceptible to cracking, and especially where these exhaust seats are here. So it's an okay head. If you can't find these other ones that I mentioned, you got to go with something. These are probably a lot more common. Now there is one advantage to this head. Okay, it's not all bad news. The advantage to this head over these other ones that I've showed you is that the 882s, at least the later 882s, they had an induction hardened exhaust seat in here. So what happened in the 70s is the regular fuel went away, and so now we're left with unleaded fuel. Well, the unleaded fuel was damaging to these cast iron seats on these earlier heads. So they started induction hardening the exhaust seat. So on the 882, that's one big advantage. If you get a set of these other heads done, the 041s or the 461s or whatever, you're probably going to have the machine shop install, when you do a valve job, a set of hardened exhaust seats. These, you won't have to do that. You can just put them on, have a valve job done, put them on, and they are compatible with unleaded fuel. So that is one advantage to these, although they are thin. Okay, so that is certainly not all the castings out there, but hopefully that gives you a little insight. My recommendations are that you go with one of these 4. If you don't have a big concern about your accessories and your pulleys, you can go with the Camel hump heads. The best choice for performance out of all of these is going to be either the Camel hump head, or even better yet, the 041 casting. The 041 is a closed chamber head, very good flowing. Okay, now a couple more things that you need to look for here. I wrote a couple things down because I wanted to give you a little bit of advice. The all-time, this is my opinion, but most people agree, the all-time worst casting Chevrolet head that you could ever buy, and that you should never buy, even if they're giving them away for $5 a piece. The only thing they're good for is basically scrap value, and I'm going to give you the casting number. This is going to tell you what casting number not to buy. Okay, so here we go. Here it is. Ding, 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 ding. The all-time junk winner is a 350 5.7 liter cylinder head. The casting number is 458624. 624. These heads were GM's attempt at making a very light cast iron engine. I'm an automotive machinist. I've built thousands of cylinder heads, and I can tell you from my experience, more than 50% of these heads when they come into my shop are cracked. These heads they didn't flow well, they had a large chamber, they were low compression, and if you look at them wrong, they crack. There's probably a 60 to 70% chance if you're buying core heads from some guy, if they are a 458 624 head, that the heads you're buying are cracked. And I'm not exaggerating about that. So stay away from the 624s. The only thing they're good for is take it down to the scrap yard and getting a few bucks for them. So that's the all-time winner. One other thing, or a couple more things actually. Some guys will take and put 305 heads. Now 305 small block is a similar head, and they will put a pair of 305 heads on their vehicle. They work okay if you're building a stock engine because they do have a small chamber. They have a 64, or even some, like the 601 here, has a much smaller chamber than that. And they work okay for a stock engine. You just need to put something together to get you down the road. They're fine as long as you lower the compression with a dish type piston so that you can run pump gas. However, I do not recommend that you use any of these for performance because the flow characteristics of the 305 heads, they have very small intake and exhaust runners, and they don't move very much air. They are poor performers as far as air goes. So these are some of the more popular castings, and you kind of want to stay away from these because these are 305 heads. 434, 450, 416, and 601. The 601 was actually a 305 HO head that had, I believe, like a 58 cc chamber, some ridiculously small chamber. And of course they all have small valves in them. So they just didn't flow. You'll have guys tell you, oh yeah, just stick a set of 305 heads on there, you'll bump your compression up. Yeah, you bump the compression up, they ain't gonna flow. They ain't gonna flow at all. They're gonna be horribly, you defeat the purpose. So stay away from 305 heads on your street run. One other thing is the date codes. Now the date codes, this is something that you probably should look for on the head. And I'll just decipher them for you. There's like our 041 head here. I took the date code off it and I wrote it down. On our 041 head it says D149. Well, the way that GM does their date codes is they put the month, the day, and the year on the head. And you're kind of going to know what era they are, just by looking at the generation of head. So if we were to decipher the date code on this 041 head, it's going to be April 14th, 1969. That head was manufactured on April 14th of 1969. Now keep in mind, when it comes to date codes, manufacturers will usually start producing the model year vehicle. Let's say 1970, they would start producing the 1970 model year vehicles in the summer of 1969. So if you look at the date code here, this is April. This was probably on a 69 vehicle. But when you get down to a higher letter here, and let's say the head was manufactured in August or September or something somewhere along those lines, even though it says August 14th, 1969, that head was probably on a 1970 model year vehicle. So if it's a 69 casting that's late in the year, it was probably from a 70 vehicle. So keep that in mind. So that's date codes, and that's something you might want to pay attention to as well. That's it in a nutshell. That's certainly not all the castings that are available. There are a lot of other Chevrolet castings out there, good and bad. In my opinion, the 041 and even the Camel Hump are some of the best flowing factory heads that GM made. They work really well. So any of these will work good for you. The best two is probably the 041 and the Camel Hump. So hopefully that helps. Kind of steer you in the right direction, tell you what casting to look for, which ones to stay away from. So if you have any questions about cylinder head castings, I don't know everything, but I know a lot. So I can definitely try to steer you in the right direction. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And also subscribe to this channel. There's going to be a lot more videos coming a lot of machine shop stuff. I've already got quite a bit on there that hopefully you'll find something that interests you. So that's my vintage iron, 7512. And also, if you go to Facebook under the same name, you can like me on Facebook. There's a lot of cool stuff there. So till next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.